Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final episode of the Wartilyo versus Team New Zealand exhibition match series. Once again, I am Lance, and I'm joined by our friend Jess Lee of Team New Zealand.
Hello.
And what a crazy week and a half that was. There were so many really good games, but
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, there could only be there could only be one. It was almost a draw, but there could only be one, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was very, very close in the end.
Yeah. So similar to how we did it with our first exhibition match, we're gonna go over the Team Wartilyo's perspective, and then I'm gonna give it over to Jess, who will be taking on Team New Zealand's perspective for pairing, so that members of the audience can get a good behind the scenes look at how we were able to come up with the pairings and the decisions we made in the first episode of the series. Okay, and then normally we could give a short recap, but based on the last time we did this, it might be better for us to do a recap of our thoughts when we actually go through the pairings process.
Sure.
Okay, so super quick. This is going to be relatively underwhelming compared to the really impressive thing that Jess submitted. This is our pairings matrix. This is what Team Wartilyo had to kind of guide us in making these decisions. The chart above is the theory, and the chart below is the actual score next to the actual result. So,
okay.
Yeah. So we didn't. In doing this, we had several ways to start with defenders, and honestly, I was trying to get your Skaven player. I was really trying to get Loki and pair him against Eagle, and I was expecting that. I was expecting you guys to start with Skaven first, right?
So something about pairings, and this is something that our teammate Jimmy Page, he's been to Worlds and he's quite good with teams and pairings. He played for Team Australia last year at Worlds, so he had some good insights. So the thing he was saying, and the thing that I agree with, and sort of how we structure our pairings, is that you can't choose pairings; you can only avoid pairings, right? So our whole premise when doing pairings was, what are the lists that we need to make sure we don't get a specific pairing, as opposed to trying to play to get certain pairings. So when it comes to me talking about my defenders, we chose those defenders because they had very specific counters. And so by placing them as defenders, we knew we would have two choices in the attackers, so we could avoid matches that way. We couldn't guarantee things, but we could avoid things. So I can talk about that more in a few minutes, but that's sort of the structure of how we chose our defenders was, which lists have potential counters that we want to avoid. Okay, those will be our defenders. So that was part of the thinking.
Well, that's so interesting. I was trying to think of no, because you put Khorne as first, and I thought it was really cool that as the captain you led as the first defender. And correct me if I'm wrong. My perspective going into pairings is that whoever is first defender tends to have the weakest position among the six, because at that point, if your opponent had two counters to your specific list, then they'd be able to shove them both in front of you, right?
Yeah, that's true, and part of that is down to the fact that we had only one red matchup for Khorne for me, which was Skaven. So because obviously with a block of 30 Blood Warriors, there's not much that can one-shot them.
Yep.
Sensor Bearers are one of those things that can potentially almost sometimes even one-shot them. So we basically made that decision based on, I want to avoid Skaven, so I'm going to be a defender that way. And I have, from our matrix, I had good matchups or neutral matchups into the rest of your lists.
Right.
So yeah, that was the reason why we placed Khorne first.
Okay. So I actually think that we agreed with you, and that Skaven was a pretty strong matchup, not only into Khorne. To be honest, I think that the Plague Sensor Bearer thing, it is a high bar, because if you can't delete something with Plague Sensor Bearers, that is a scary thought, considering how much they do. In
Yes,
our
absolutely.
in our matrix, we only had one person who was green into Skaven. That was Nico with the Gits army, partly
Mhm.
because he is used to the matchup, and
Sure.
because we've simulated that matchup already, because Eagle has simulated a similar-ish Skaven list. So we were trying to catch your Skaven as defender, but I think you guys knew that your Skaven pick was a lot more versatile than that. So you wanted to maybe save them for a bit later.
Yep. Yeah, so
Okay.
basically we had identified that Khorne had a weak matchup into Skaven, so we led with Khorne.
Right.
And then we also didn't want to put Jimmy on Zinch into Khorne, so we led with him as second defender
Right.
to avoid the Khorne matchup. So again, with the like tactic of avoiding matchups as opposed to choosing matchups. Um,
Okay. No, that's fair. Actually, wait. Jimmy wasn't second defender, right? Or was that just the plan? And like,
that was the plan. I think we ended
oh,
up
okay.
with
With Michael.
slaves
Yeah,
as
Michael
second
was second
defender.
defender.
Yeah, if we look at our matrix, which we'll do in a moment,
Yeah.
um, basically the options for defender in round 2 were either Jimmy or Michael.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've actually shifted it over to your matrix at this point, because I think it would be
Okay.
more interesting, since you have a lot of insights into the matchup. And one thing that I appreciate that Team New Zealand did is that you put numeric numbers to your matrices. I think Australia did this similarly in our last one,
Yep.
but we haven't really acclimated to putting specific numbers. And
Yep.
due to our relative inexperience with team matchups, we usually just use the basic colors, red being terrible, green being favorable, and yellow being about neutral-ish. And
Sure.
just to highlight this, if you look at the actual results in the bottom table, you'll see that Dennis's OBR went against Jimmy, and that scored only 5 points. So we
Mhm.
downgraded it from a yellow to a red. Nico's
Yep.
gets against Kylebron, which initially he thought would be a red, was upgraded to a yellow because the result was an 11. My
Yes.
matchup against Michael, I initially thought it would be a yellow,
Yep.
honestly, and I don't
So
know, things happened, and
yeah,
yeah,
things do. And so we knew that we had two volatile matchups.
yep,
This was after pairings, but
right,
we knew this as we were pairing. We knew that slaves into Khorne
yep,
could basically flip either way.
right,
It could be like an 18-2 or a 19-1 on either side based on how the first and second turn play out.
yes,
Um, and like who gets a double wear and all that kind of stuff. Because the Khorne list has the output and has the sequencing.
right,
The slaves list has just so much output with the double
yeah,
fighting Vanguard, and
hmm
so like they can take down a Bloodthirster in a single activation if they roll well.
absolutely,
Especially on the charge. So yeah, so that we knew would be a volatile one. We also knew that gets into Doc
hmm
um, could also be volatile. We played a practice matchup, and I played Gits because I've played Gits before. So I
right,
played Git. I played your Gits list um,
into
um,
James,
into James, and
yeah,
everything went right. Everything went right for James, and he tabled me bottom of 2.
that's
Um,
wild. Okay,
so so we knew that that was a possibility going into that matchup. Um, we did probably play 7 or 8 practice games um, in the lead up once we had the pairings done
nice.
across like all of our players. Like we didn't each play 8 practice games, but like across all of us, we probably played 7 or 8 practice games.
Wow,
So
yeah.
yeah,
That's pretty great that you guys did like 8 practice games. I feel like it really showed in how clean the play was, especially in some of the games we're going to talk about later. What's the?
Hmm.
Oh, but I'm looking at the chart now, and I want to ask you, what's the difference between a volatile 3 versus a volatile 4? Because you guys put
So
Dock into Gits as a 4. But sorry, Jess, we were talking about how
that's okay.
the difference between a volatile 4 versus a volatile 3, because you mentioned that the Dock versus Gits matchup was volatile, but also that Slaves versus Khorne was volatile, but you gave them different numerical designations.
Yeah, so that was based on us just analyzing the match before we had done any practice, because obviously we were doing pairings before we practiced.
Right.
So yeah, on paper we really liked the slave list into Khorne, even though we recognized that it was volatile. Just the being able to get the Nurgle Knights on -1 rend, -1 to wound, and a 2-up
Right.
save.
Yep.
And then 12 Vanguard, each being able to double fight each of the 6s. Just the amount of output, we thought it had the advantage over the Khorne list, so that's why we rated it higher here.
Yeah.
But in the back of our mind, we still knew it was going to be a volatile matchup, but that's why it got a 4.
Fair.
Just because it had the tools that we wanted to deal with Khorne.
Oh, no, you got a 3 for this one, just real quick.
Yeah, we ended up downgrading it. We changed these a couple of times.
Okay.
Yeah.
My bad. Yeah.
Yeah, we initially rated it quite highly, and then we bumped it down.
So, okay. So, real quick, the methodology our team used, because I want to ask you what you guys did. And because we are not exactly as used to working together as a team, what I would do is I would ask my players what they would consider to be green, yellows, and reds. So, a lot of the way our table was built was from our own player biases rather
Yes.
than a big meta. Because I know that New Zealand has a very storied history, or has maybe had a lot more GT experience than we've had. We've had a couple of years, but maybe we have 1 or 2 a year.
Yeah, we've been playing since AOS 1 in New Zealand, and
Okay.
fantasy as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, so there's a good, what is it, 7-8 years now AOS has been around. I forget, but it's been a while.
Right.
So we generally have maybe 5 biggish GTs a year. Biggish being 30
5.
people.
Oh, that's big. Yeah, that's big. We recently just hit 32, and that was the first time. So what's interesting is that we've also had a long history with Warhammer Fantasy, and even up until maybe 3rd Ed 40K from a long time ago. But for a lot of the players who are playing here started in 3rd Ed AOS, and we have 1 or 2 GTs. And the first GT that we ran a couple years ago hit 14 players. The one we ran last year hit 24. This year we have 32. So we're growing pretty fast. But we don't have 5 GTs with 30 plus. So instead of basing our estimations on the meta, which I think right now could use a bigger sample size to test, we base it on our personal experiences. So Pat, for example, I think he rates the swinginess of the Ogre matchup a bit lower. So if you look at, for the audience, I'm looking at the screen, we put Skaven, Disciples of Tzeentch, and Slaves of Darkness as reds. And the only green for him is Daughters of Cain, just because he's experienced with the army and he knows the matchup. Everything else is yellow. But I think you guys rated Ogres a bit differently. And we were pleasantly surprised to see the difference in the way we saw Ogres, for example.
Yeah, and I think that just comes from our meta being maybe a little bit closer to the worldwide meta, or just like some of our players, me, James, Ryan, we follow the meta worldwide very closely. So I'm very familiar with the sort of monster truck ogre list. And it's doing really well worldwide right now. So it's when we saw that, we weren't surprised at all because it fits an archetype that we're familiar with. So we knew it was a strong list. I think we underrated it a little bit, which came out in the actual matchup. But even so, looking back on it, I still would have sort of dived on that bomb with Khorne to prevent ogres going into one of the other lists.
Right.
So it ended up being like, even though I lost the match, it ended up being, I think, still a good pairings decision looking
It
back on it.
was. Yeah.
But yeah, like that list is just very, very strong generally. Um, so we figured you would have one list like that, and we figured it was going to be ogres or it was going to be Sons of Behemoth. So we kind of planned for
Right.
both in our pairings, and then obviously it was ogres. So yeah,
Yeah. What's also interesting to me is that I think, looking back, I think you guys prepared better in terms of building lists catering to the missions. Like, for example, um,
yeah,
we each played the armies we were comfortable with,
sure,
but I think that from our end at least, I personally felt Ogres and Sylvaneth were a bit harder to pair into these missions. And I know
yep,
that maybe we have a different assessment for what Ogres are good at, But with Sylvaneth, we initially wanted to try putting Jaw into Every Step is Forward, but then we played the mission out, and it was really hard having No Man's Land with Sylvaneth. So sorry,
yes,
no Man's Land rather. It's negative,
yeah,
right? So no Man's Land. So we
sure.
we we put him in lines of communication, and oh yeah, that didn't go super well. Did out of curiosity, did you really plan for Soulblight Gravelords to go into lines? Because all of us were initially thinking Soulblight with all the bajillions of charges that they could do and the counter charge build that you guys developed was gonna go
Mhm.
into Every Step is Forward.
Yeah, it was just a matter of getting into good matchups more so than specifically trying um, to get Soul Blight into Every Step is Forward. Um,
Okay.
and like I think also, yeah, I think Ryan might even have rated himself lower on Every Step is Forward. I have to ask him exactly why that was.
Right.
Um, but I think that he felt, probably with the fewer objectives, that his swamp would be able to lock down more of those objectives with lines of communication, which ended up
Okay.
being the case. Um, so,
True.
and we were super happy to put him into Sylvaneth as well. That was a big win for us in pairings.
No, it was. And I looking at this chart, it seemed like Sylvaneth was a comfortable match for many of the archetypes that you brought down.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it was.
we
It was.
we initially thought, based on a play test that we did with not exactly Soulblight, but COS, with a lot
Yep.
of counter charges and stuff, we initially thought that Sylvaneth would do a lot better into this matchup. But I think
Yeah.
that Ryan played a really good game, and we
Yeah.
flipped the.
Ryan only played. Sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
go on. No, go ahead. No, Ryan only plays.
Oh, just saying, Ryan only plays Soul Blade. He plays
I
one
see.
army, and he's played it the whole time. So
You know.
he's basically a one trick on Soul Blade, but he's
Yep.
extremely good at Soul Blade.
Yeah.
So we felt confident putting him into basically anything, just because he's an extremely good player on that specific army.
Nice.
Um, but I think also, just with like, the reason we weren't worried about it is because, like, with the recursion, which is the thing that cities doesn't have, um, and just like all those little units, things coming back, movement
Mm-hmm.
tricks, blocking up avenues, all that kind of stuff, it just makes that style of Soulblight list that he ran really challenging to play into.
That's true. And Sylvaneth is already a tough army to play, and then playing against something that you have to play with extra finesse against must have been really challenging.
Sure.
So we flipped
Yeah.
it. We initially rated it as a green actually, because it
Ah,
was the
yes.
matchup that Job preferred, and it turned into a red. It swung to
Yeah.
17-3 instead. The
Yeah.
other match that was a bit more predictable was the Rats Mirror. Unfortunately,
Yes.
yeah, unfortunately, Eagle couldn't play because of
Yeah.
an emergency. So
Yeah.
our MVP was Dennis, who was able to sub because Dennis also plays
Mhm.
Skaven, though it was with a
Yep.
very kind of a different list of flavor of Skaven that he was used to rather. So it went
Sure.
down to about yellow 12-8, I think. I think the score was like a 1 point difference in.
Yeah, it was close. Yep.
It was very close, yeah.
Yep.
So it was Every Step is Forward Skaven. Yeah, 3-3. Okay, that makes sense. So
Yep.
what's also really interesting is the order of it all, right? Before we talk about the last game, because I have questions about the Zinch versus OBR matchup that you guys rated as a 5.
Yeah.
A 5 being favorable to you guys, not 5 as in that's the score you're getting. So
Correct. Yep.
up until this point, Team Wartilyo, if you guys have been watching the YouTube videos, we're leading by quite a bit just because of the
Yes.
order of the games, not because of like proficiency or anything. And
Yep.
Jimmy or James had to like Jimmy.
Yeah, we'll just say
Sorry.
Jimmy because we have another James as well, so we'll just say Jimmy. Yeah.
That's fair. Okay, I got this from the army list, so sometimes I think I
Yep.
confused myself a bit. Sorry. So like,
yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, so Jimmy was the final game, and he didn't just have to win, but he needed to win by a certain margin in order to surpass the lead that Wartilyo had. That was slowly being chipped away by the games against the game against Dennis, and the game the game against Nico, because Nico led by like 1 on a minor victory, so it was like 11-9. But you guys put Zinch as not just like a favorable matchup, but a perfect 5 into OBR in almost every universe. Tell us what you thought about that.
We thought the OBR list was bad.
Oh,
that's
really?
What it
Okay.
comes down to. Yeah. So
I
played
I appreciate the candidness, by the way, but sorry, keep going.
Yeah, it's also like just like not actually like bad, but I played OBR all of last year. And basically I think that playing both Catacross and Arkin together is just too greedy now with the points increases. So it's too many eggs in just 2 baskets, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
Because of that, there's no room for hammers, there's no room for redundancies, there's no room for bodies, because almost half of your points are summoned into 2 characters. And then also with OBR not being null myriad, there's no protection from Zinch in terms of the magic output. Arcane is good, +2 to unbind is strong, but against the volume that Zinch has in terms of just their volume of spellcasting, it's not enough. OBR is also slow. All of us felt really comfortable playing into OBR, but Jimmy was the one we ended up putting, which was in the end it was great because we were extremely confident that he could get the required number of points that he needed in that game. He's also Jimmy is a very good player, and he has been playing Zinch for since AOS 1, I'm pretty sure. So
that's wild.
He's extremely proficient on Zinch. So it was really nice ending on that matchup for us because we could basically tell Jimmy, here's the score now, here's what you need to do, and he could do it. So we felt really good about that being our last matchup. In fact, we basically were like with Lockie and the Skaven matchup because he ended up being the 4th game. I know that 5th game rather.
Fifth, yeah.
Yeah, the second to last game. We were like, okay, so you need to keep the margins to at least this, and then if that happens, then Jimmy, you need to get at least this. And we basically got exactly what we wanted to on out of both of those matchups, which was great.
No, it was actually very impressive. I think you mentioned that since Jimmy was a Worlds player, you mentioned Jimmy was a Worlds player. Did he bring Zinch to Worlds last year? I'm just curious.
Actually,
I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I actually can't remember. He either brought Zinch or KO. I forget. I think he was going to bring KO maybe, and there was like a change last minute or something. So I'm actually not sure what he brought to Worlds. But Zinch is his primary army.
So for full transparency to the audience, I myself, and I don't think Jess has either, we haven't watched the games past the 3rd game. So up until this, as of the time of recording, the round release was round 3, where Joss took his Sylvaneth to go up against Chops and his Soulblight. I haven't actually watched the games between Nico and James, Jimmy and Dennis, and sorry, your Skaven player's name is Lockie and Dennis. Yeah. So I haven't seen those games yet. Yeah. So I'm actually really interested in watching them, especially after talking to Jess like now. Okay. And the score that they eventually landed on was 15-5 in favor of Zinch. For people in the audience, when you rate something, let's say a perfect 5, what score are you expecting? What counts as a green for you? Like, is it 15 upwards, or is it something else?
I mean, yeah, you could qualify it that way.
Sure.
You can also think about it as like a 5 is like we're going to get a green result no matter what. So like a 5 can be we're going to win by a certain amount, but a 5 can also be rated as this is our confidence that we're going to get a green.
Right.
So we were extremely confident that he was going to win the matchup. By how much he won was a little bit more up in the air, but we put the 5 because we were like, this is going to be a winning matchup no matter what.
Right.
And we also knew that we had like, a really good chance of basically being able to get whatever score we needed. We could ask Jimmy to play more risky. If he needed to get more points, we could ask him to pull back a little bit if he needed to get less points. So we weren't concerned with that game just blowing it out as fast as we could. We wanted to play at the right tempo to get the right score and not take any unnecessary risks.
Right.
And Jimmy is really good at playing like that with a goal in mind.
You guys had like cute nicknames for each person when you submitted the pairings list, and I think he was the machine. Yeah. Was he the machine?
Yes, he is the machine. Yeah.
Okay, noted. So I'm really eager to watch that game now because I want to see what What I think I mentioned this to you. I don't know if it was off stream or in the previous time we had this thing. It was that his list was the weirdest list. It was the only list I saw that didn't feel like a cookie cutter mainstream list, even like from our side, right? Like, I saw it, and I was so curious to see how it would work. And we had Dennis play against a local Zinch player to test it out, and it went in favor of our OBR player actually. So I think there was obviously some like secret sauce in like the way it was played that we didn't exactly figure out. But that's what makes it so much more exciting to watch eventually. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So did Jimmy build this list specifically for this matchup, or is this an archetype that he's practiced for a while now? I'm just curious.
He's comfortable enough with Zinch that he can basically put anything down and play with it. He has tendencies, like he likes Zangor a lot. And with the increase to 2-inch range that they got in the battle scroll, which happened right before this, it was the perfect time for him to put some of them in there. So,
man.
Like he's done stuff. He's played also Beasts of Chaos, and he's run a bunch of Zangor and Beasts of Chaos as well. But yeah, the 2-inch reach was just the thing we needed to bump him over to putting Zangor into Zinch. But from our perspective, we were happy to just let him cook and let him do his thing because we knew whatever he did, it would be good. It's one of those kind of players where like we know he knows the army so much better than we do that we just let him do his thing, and trust that he can get a good result, which he did. So
all right. That's pretty awesome. No, I love that. Like, I kind of narratively, it's pretty cool that like this Swiss knife player was like in the back pocket of the team up until the round 6. That was pretty. That's from a narrative perspective. That's really cool. So before we move on to like the final score, and one more question I have for Team New Zealand, I want the audience to take a look at this. What I have on screen right now is the pairings matrix that they had for each of the each of the possible first round opponents. So and this is something we didn't do, like Team Wartilyo didn't do, Team New Zealand prepared this. So if I put myself as first defender, they were going to throw Soulblight and Slaves at me. If it was Jaw, they throw Zinch and Slaves. All of this is the Geomantic Pulse, by the way, for context. Ogres, they throw Skaven and Zinch. Actually, for Ogres, you guys had 3 different choices depending on what you felt like. It was Skaven, Slaves, and Zinch. and Gits, it was DOK into slaves. So it's very interesting because we both had the assessment that DOK would be okay into Gits, but
Yes.
I don't know. For me, Nico is our like Jimmy in a way, in that that he consistently does really well at tournaments, and for it to be as close as it got, I was a little happy. I was kind of happy with the result. But at the same time, like, you know, Nico is our clutch player, and we went to a draw.
Yeah.
So it speaks a lot to how well James played as well, and how much you guys prepped. OBR,
For sure.
as we saw, Skaven versus Zinch, and I picked Zinch. And in hindsight, maybe Skaven might have been a cleaner matchup, though Skaven to the Geomantic Pulse is really strong. And lastly, Skaven to Skaven versus Soulblight. And so that's very interesting. I really liked it. One more question I have, and this is something I also that was brought up to us as feedback for the exhibition match was: do you think not playing all these matches simultaneously really affected the way the remaining matches unfolded?
Yes.
Okay.
I think on our end they did, but I think that was, at least on our end, that was intentional. Like, we were treating this as, you know, rounds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at a teams tournament. So you at round 2 you would have the results for round 1 already, and et cetera, et cetera. So we thought about it not like we're playing one simultaneous round, but like we're playing each a game in a different round of a teams tournament. That's how we were thinking about it, at least. So you would have the information from the previous rounds to kind of guide you. And I think when you're doing like a snapshot of a teams event, kind of like what we're doing here, that's a really cool part of a teams event, being able to strategize and say like, okay, so you know, we're at this point, we have this score, this team is up next, we need to get at least this score, because it influences how many risks you might take. If you're down, you need to earn a lot of points, or if you are in the lead but just barely, and you don't want to sacrifice that lead by making risky plays, which might jeopardize things. So I think that's one of the most fun parts of a teams tournament, is like the sort of like huddle you get between rounds, where you're trying to strategize for how to play out the next round. So we definitely did quite a bit of that in between matchups. So yeah, I think it definitely influenced some of our decisions in the matchups.
I see. So, okay.
Whereas if you played them blind,
yeah,
if you played them without any knowledge of how the other matches went, then that changes things, both from like the pressure the players may feel, and also from, you know, maybe some of the actions they might take in the game based on the knowledge of what the score is at any given time. So yeah.
All right, that's fair.
Yeah.
In your minds going into this, without we don't need to go super deep into it. Was there like an ideal order of matches for you? Considering we know this is all not happening at the same time.
No, not really.
Okay, yeah,
like
same.
we just like, we're like, whenever we can organize them, and we kind of catered it to your guys' schedule as much as we could, because obviously you're doing the recordings and stuff. So however the matches fell is how they fell. We didn't strategize about like what sequence to go in with the matches. We just looked at what matches had happened, and then tried to make decisions for the next match that was coming up based on our schedules. So yeah. So like, while I think it did influence things, we didn't strategically schedule the matches at all.
That's fair. Okay. So the final score that it went down to was 58-62 in favor of Team New Zealand. So it was a tight matchup. So it was so awesome to play against you guys. I think it's nice for us to be able to meet people from other parts of the world and have this shared love of Age of Sigmar. Everyone in our team had fun playing against you guys. Everyone was so nice.
Yeah, same with us. Like, we really, like, a couple of the guys on our team have already scheduled other matches with some of the guys on your team, which is great.
Nice.
Just like friendly matches, which is amazing.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, it was a great experience overall, and is tons of fun. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, it's just like it's nice meeting new people, getting like a window into like a different meta in a different country. And then also just like the feedback, at least from our team side, was that like we really felt like we were of similar skill levels. Like I know the result ended up with us winning, but
Yeah.
the score was was really really close. And so in the broad scheme of things, it felt very equal, and I think the scores reflect that, which is really cool.
Yeah. If you were to watch it in the order that we released the episodes, though, it looked like Team New Zealand was coming back from like a lower pointage, but
Yeah,
that
it's
wasn't the
true,
case at all. It was very even. Like everyone had like a very healthy respect for each other's skills. It was
for
super
sure.
awesome, and I want to thank you again, Jess. I was we were so delighted when you and James reached out to us
Mm.
for this exhibition match, and for anyone else watching, we are open to meeting more people and playing more games with y'all, and just getting to making more friends, really, more than anything
Yeah,
else.
100%. 100%.
So, yeah. So you know what? If you guys were wondering why Jess is so eloquent, it's because Jess has a podcast, right?
Oh yeah, it's I haven't updated it in a while, but yeah,
Oh,
I do
okay.
have a podcast. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So she's got she's a talented podcast speaker. If it hasn't updated in a while, but if in case like people wanted to hear more about you and other
Yeah.
members of Team New Zealand, where can we find you?
Yeah, so the podcast, which we can also just probably put in the notes
Yep.
of
We'll put
this
in.
video as well.
Yep.
So
Sure.
there'll be a link, but it's called Pukeko Tabletop Talks, which
Mm-hmm.
is the name of the bird. It's our logo. It's like a
Yep.
native bird,
It's right
which
there.
you can see in the picture there. Yeah, the
Yep.
one. It's kind of like a chicken. It's quite big, black with the orange nose, and like you see them all the time by like the side of the road and stuff.
Nice.
So I do that podcast. I did some interviews with some people who have done well in the community and stuff. So yeah, we talk about the hobby and kind of what's happening in New Zealand, which is cool.
Yep. Fantastic. So thank you so much for joining me, Jess. Thank you to Team New
No
Zealand as
worries.
well. I learned so much from this. Every time we do an exhibition game, like we learn so much and we meet so many people, and it's always so awesome to meet people from across like the ocean and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, same on our end for sure. It was a great experience, and yeah, we loved meeting you guys and playing some games.
If you guys are ever in Manila, come hit us up. We'd love to get some IRL games and stuff. Or if you ever
100%.
decide to drop by for a
Yeah.
GT, that would be super sick.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's like quite expensive to go to the Philippines, but like
Yeah,
I
true.
would definitely consider it at this point.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
All
Yeah.
right, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the exhibition match series. I'm Lance. I'm joined by Jess from Team New Zealand. Thank you for joining us. If you like content like this, please hit the like, hit a sub, and leave a comment for things that you like, things that you didn't like. We're always open to feedback. And with that, we're just going to be signing out. Peace, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Mhm.